Hi everyone, my name is Tia and happy June. I had such a rejuvenating May. I think I said that similarly in April, but I saw so many loved ones. I laughed so much. It was a very valuable month in the personal life department, you know? So I read 7 books in May, and on top of the books that I so lovingly read this month, I also want to discuss a little bit of just my favorites. I don't know. My life has been full of love and I've been loving things. So let's talk about what I have been loving. Oh wait, let me go get it. I have been back on my wired earphone game. They're so fun to use. The way that this has a microphone on it as well, and I can control the volume. The reason why I even switched in the first place is because I was on a run. I usually only run with one AirPod, but I went to a school track so that I could put in both earphones. I was gonna get in a great workout. I put these in, and I guess like the pressure because of the squishy little tips, I got the worst tension headache. Or pressure headache, I think. My ears were just so clogged, and I think the pressure just got way too much because I was running and I was like sweaty or hot or something. Oh my god, I had like the worst migraine that night. Ever since that freaking run, I have dug out these bad boys and I have loved them. I'm still trapped in the Tortured Poets Department jail. Like, that album still has me by the neck. I escaped the jail actually earlier in May. I feel like once it was released, all up till the very beginning of May, did not listen to one other album, artist, nothing. It was just TTPD on repeat. And then I visited one of my best friends and she was still in jail. And since I had escaped, I don't know, somehow I let her escape and then she trapped me in the jail. All of May, it's been really difficult for me to listen to anything else besides the Tortured Poets Department, the anthology to be specific. And also, if my voice sounds incredibly like I just woke up, it is in fact 1:30 p.m. and I did wake up at like 6 because there are people fixing my roof today. So if a man falls to my roof, I'm gonna do my best to catch him. But I think because of the dust and whatnot, I'm sneezing a lot. My throat kind of bothers me. I really hope I'm not sick, but that's why I sound like I am sick is what I was trying to say. But hopefully I'm not sick. Favorites of TTPD. We as a society are annoyed by repetitive things, right? However, the iron grip I look in people's windows has on me, I think is genuinely a mental illness. It is not like the perfect song, but I don't know where I saw it, but I saw if you listen to the song Peter in Wendy's perspective, and then you listen to I Look in People's Windows from Peter's perspective singing to Wendy, it's a very me, like, it's a little bit too on the nose, and I don't want to talk about it any further. The Bolter is a new favorite. Sam or Chloe or Sophia or Marcus, one of my top since my first listen, and it has not gone down. The Black Dog. Ooh, also The Alchemy. Those are really good. So I feel like that is as is millions of other hot girls. That's my album of the month. Ooh, you know what's a really good favorite? I actually started a book. I DNF'd it, but I started a book because I saw a life-changing quote, completely out of context. I think it was on my Instagram Explore page. It is a quote pulled from one of Olivia Lang's articles for The Guardian. Loneliness, coping with the gap where friends used to be. Here, I'll put it right here. So, because you know how to read. You soak that in for a little bit, come back to me, because basically it is just touching on like how the weight of the world is oh so very painfully heavy on your own. But after a dinner with a friend, after you share the small grievances of being a human being of everyday life, the weight of the world does not seem so bad when you share that weight with a friend. And I just like, that is so sweet. I feel like this quote truly does epitomize how I felt in May and how I lived my life in May. I tried to really soak in the present and go out of my way to see people that I love, even though sometimes I get like a little nervous about stuff like that. So that was a beautiful quote that I personally discovered in May. And I'm always in the market for very out of context Instagram Explore quotes that devastated your morning. In my comments, please, I want to know. I want to be devastated too. In terms of reading, I read 3 audiobooks, I read 1 book on my Kindle, and I read 3 physical books off my TBR. My genre breakdown is that I read 1 classic. Are you proud of me? 2 contemporary romances, 1 memoir, 2 literary fiction, and 1 thriller. But I feel like the thriller I'm going to talk about is kind of like a thrillery, literary fiction-y book, which is Bright Young Woman by Jessica Knoll. I started it in April, so I feel like it's been so long since I read that book, but I very much think it was worth the read. I rated it 4 stars because I don't do half ratings. This is a fictionalized narration or recollection of the real-life sorority targeted by America's first celebrity serial killer in his final murderous spree in 1978. So this is based on something that actually happened. However, all the characters are fictional and like she fabricated the storyline. It's told through the perspective of women who are affected by this heinous crime. We are never told really about the serial killer or the man that did it. He's always just mentioned as the killer, and we focus on the women's side and the women's perspective and the women's experience going through this absolute tragedy. It definitely capitalizes on our society's like grotesque interest in true crime. Granted, like I have read my fair share of mysteries. I'm not brave enough to listen or be interested in true crime. Like I'm just too much of a scaredy cat. But true crime is obviously like a really big niche of content that people consume. So I think there's some really neat and important commentary about the what's the word? Sensationalism of criminals, serial killers, true crime. Like there are actual people involved in these. This is someone's real life. It's not for entertainment. And the irony is like it is written in this like fictionalized, not fictionalized book. I was engaged the entire time and I just could not put this audiobook down. Now, the next book I have to talk about is like something I don't even know if I'm ready to talk about, and I read it weeks ago. But How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwan. I don't know how to explain this to you without absolutely feeling like I'm gonna lose my mind. This was written like a fan fiction, but in the most complimentary, best way possible. Like if you don't read fan fiction, please don't take that as an insult in any way. Addicting. Like you do not want to put it down. Since she herself, Yulin is the one who is directing the movies for Emily Henry's movie adaptations. So maybe because she's a screenwriter, the way she pays attention to the very subtle moments of romance is that of watching a movie. There are very, very fine details that I was like, ooh, like you could just tell. She loves the art of storytelling, and I was so enwrapped in this contemporary romance. I will say there should definitely be a trigger warning about mentions of a familial suicide and grief. The premise of the story is like pretty rough. So Helen and Grant, they're both in their 30s. Helen is a very popular YA author. She's getting her books adapted into a TV show, and Grant Shepard happens to be working at the TV production company that Helen is getting her stuff adapted for. Grant and Helen already know each other from high school because Helen's sister died by suicide, and the sister died by suicide by jumping in front of Grant's car on the highway. And Grant is not guilty in the court's eyes. Helen's eyes, she goes a little bit more in depth into like those kinds of reasons, but like Grant has had to deal with that too, so they kind of share a mutual tragedy. And the book starts off at the funeral. If you're like, oh my god, that sounds like a lot, you're right. But I think I thought about these characters for like 2 or 3 weeks after putting the book down. I got the audiobook and then I searched far and wide for a physical copy. One, fantastic. Didn't know that my copy was going to come with a signature. I love that for me specifically. I have so many quotes highlighted. This book is so good. Grant and I are like this. And if you think he's an asshole, then I don't know. I don't know what to say. I can't look him in the eye. But like, for example, we're just learning a little bit more about Grant. Eventually, it did become his dream, and he discovered the terrifying feeling of wanting something for himself and not being sure he would ever get it. Grant, good in a room, but not a creative genius by any means. Good in a room if you need someone to fill an empty seat for a while. Good in a room, he'll win you over and convince you just how much you need him, when really, he's the one who needs you. The moments, the tiny moments of tension were so well done. I will say there's smut in this. If that's not your cup of tea, you might not feel the same way about this couple than I do. I will never shut up about how much I love this book. But I just wanted to reiterate that not only did I see myself in Grant's insecurities, I haven't felt so seen in a female main character in a really long time. Helen in this book, whether it be a red flag or not, I related so much to her. She is the epitome of the Chinese American kid with immigrant parents experience, just like tenfold because of what she's going through. There is so much cultural context and cultural nuance in this book about the Chinese American experience and how sometimes Asian families find it really difficult to communicate their emotions well, if at all, and like how that kind of leads to disjointed generations and how our love languages are not the same. Not only did I love the chemistry between the two, but like what Helen really had to say to her parents and also say about her sister really just stood out to me as a contemporary romance in a different tier. Plus, Emily Henry said this about this book, and dropped my phone for that, and I wholeheartedly agree. She put her whole bookussy into this, okay? Like, it put me in such a bad reading slump in May, actually, after this, and I will be thinking about it for months and months and months. The classic that I read this month was Pride and Prejudice. I read it with the fantastic Martine, whose channel I will link below. Pride and Prejudice was... it was tough. The language is just so different. It's very difficult to get used to, in my opinion. But go into Pride and Prejudice thinking and knowing that she wrote it as a comedy, and you'll have a blast. Like, the side characters are so ridiculous. They're absolutely infuriating. It's funny. Like, this sounds bad, but like, I like the movie more than I like the book. If you read Pride and Prejudice, you have to watch the movie. This one, the famous one, the hand flex one. I watched it for the first time. It is fantastic. The ending is... perfection. And after contextualizing the movie with the book, like, I feel like they can only add to one another. Like, if you love the movie, totally read the book, even if the language seems difficult. It is such a fun read. If you've read the book, please go watch that movie. Oh, it was so fun. I gave it a 4 stars because I think there was just not enough Mr. Darcy for me. However, by the end of the book, I was really invested. I was having a really good time. I think it's like chapter 33. The book should be split up instead of 3 parts. It should be pre-chapter 33, post-chapter 33. If you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but what a blast. What a blast. That was really fun. I'm glad that I got to read my first classic with Martine. Buddy reads are something that I've been really loving this year. Okay, and then we got The Paradise Problem by Christina Williams. Christina who? Christina Lauren. The Paradise Problem really let me down in that I wasn't connected to the characters at all. I wasn't invested in the relationship at all. I feel like nothing really happened plot-wise. And just everyone was quite one-dimensional. This sounds kind of harsh, but it was an okay contemporary romance. Like, I've read almost every Christina Lauren book. I will always pick up her books. I think they're really fun to read. So I don't really go into that with a critical eye. If you're looking for that, don't go to Christina Lauren. But if you want to have a fun time, if you want to read the epitome of contemporary romance. So I just gave it 3 stars. Didn't think about it that hard while I was reading it. Didn't think too hard at all after I was done. Can't even really remember the main characters at this point, weeks after I read it. So that's enough to tell you. But 3 stars for sure. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. And with Jillian, who I absolutely also love, I will link her TikTok below. Jillian and I read The Friend by Sigrid Nunez. I've heard really good things about this book, so I was excited going into it. It is essentially, we follow our narrator who is grieving the loss of a really close friend. He started off as like a mentor because she is a writer. He's also like a professor of writing or something. So they started off with like a professional relationship that kind of bled into both their personal lives in a platonic way. She's grieving her friend, and she ends up with the friend's dog, who is also grieving for his owner. Now, I think the premise is fantastic. In execution, however, I was so thrown off by this book. I was either a little grossed out or really bored throughout the entire thing, which is such a letdown. I gave this 3 stars because I don't think it deserves 2 stars by any means. I don't think I'm the target audience for this book. This is very much a love letter to literature as well. There's lots of references to different authors. It flew completely over my head. And that's my fault completely. And there are some really good quotes in here. Absolutely devastating. So she's talking about how the wife of her late friend mentioned that the dog barks a lot. So the narrator says, "I've yet to hear the howling. I wonder if this is because he made a connection between howling and being banished to the kennel, which may be a stretch, but that he doesn't howl anymore is one reason I believe he's given up hope of ever seeing you again." Oh my God, This fictional dog broke my heart. However, there was too much animal sexualization, or like the discussion of animal sexualization in this book than necessary. I just didn't want to keep hearing about it. It brought up way too much. I was quite bored, to be honest. Definitely some hard-hitting writing and definitely some really very emotional quotes. Not enough for me to like this book. My other literary fiction I read this month was Lie With Me. Now, this was emotionally devastating as well. I would highly recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. I might bump it down to 4 stars, but the initial read, I mean, I stayed up all night. Not all night. I stayed up for like an extra 45 minutes to finish this book. Instead of like putting it down and reading it the next morning, I just couldn't. I needed to know what was going on. And I was just so enwrapped by these two men. It comes off very nostalgic, which is I think what really drew me. I love nostalgic media, art, books. This was so sad. It was a punch to the gut, but definitely a love letter to both yourself and your past self, and especially your young self who is in the closet still and dealing with really big emotions that 50 years pass and you don't feel like they're big, but you acknowledge that they're big. Does that make sense? I loved this. This hurt. And the last book that I picked up in May was a memoir. It was Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, which I rated 3 stars. I thought it was an okay audiobook, and I find it really awkward to rate memoirs. I'm more so rating it not about their life experience, because oh my god, I love memoirs and I love listening to people and their life stories, and I'm glad that people are open to sharing their stories. I think we need more of that, but I'm more so rating to show you if I enjoyed my time reading this. Like the vibes. This book is kind of tricky because I don't think I emotionally clicked with a lot of what he was saying throughout the book, because it was just like observation after observation, and that's just really my opinion. Reflections from the 70s about the political climate, especially in Detroit. He was a gay Republican. That's really interesting. And as he grew up, he kind of reflected on his Republican views versus like what he believes in himself and what he wants for himself. I guess I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I read it. That was just like a book I read, you know what I mean? In terms of DNFs, I DNF 2. I'm so disappointed in the first one being the partner plot. Oh my god. I love second chance romances, so I was really excited going into it. It is a second chance romance. They date in high school sweethearts. 10 years later, they meet again. But my caveat for second chance romances is they have to be good. Like, there has to be a good reason why the first chance didn't work out. And I just feel like once I learned why he broke her heart in the first place, I was like, you are an amazing woman. Why are you still hung up on this boy? It's just so unfathomable that she would want, or she would be okay with giving this guy a second chance. It was just too upsetting. I just don't understand how she could still be hung up on him, and then therefore I was already rooting against the second chance romance part. Like, I wasn't rooting for these two to get back together in the present, and like that's why you read second chance romances. So I was like, oh, I can't do this. I just can't do this. Oh my god. Oh, it's so sad. It didn't make any sense to me. Big bummer, but I was enjoying the writing before. I was like, ooh, I can't wait to see what's happening. So I'm definitely going to be checking out the other authors' books because they also intrigue me, or like at least I think she has one more and I'm excited to read that one. And then I mentioned earlier in the video, I love that quote by Olivia Lang. I then Googled Olivia Lang and I found a book called Everybody, a Book About Freedom. I thought that book was where the quote came from. That quote's from an article actually. So I like randomly out of context picked out this book, and it is the wrong book. I don't think this article is pulling an excerpt from this book. I think I read an entirely different book. I was so bored. I was trying to read this on airplanes and it literally put me to bed. It's supposed to be a book about the freedom of bodies and like removing ourselves from like the sexualization of our bodies, or even the physicality of our bodies, which I thought would be really interesting to me. However, the author herself got some kind of degree in like healing or some kind of bodily, I can't remember what it was. After that point, I was like, okay, I don't really think I can connect to like the spiritual side of her passion and what she was writing about. So I just decided there's so many other amazing books that I want to get to, So again, these DNFs, nothing against these books. I think it's these authors, like both these authors I am a fan of still. I'm just going to try and pick up their other works instead. Those were the books that I read in May. I cannot wait until my throat feels better. I don't like this feeling at all. June started off really good for me. I just turned 25 a couple days ago. So crazy. It's Pride Month, baby. Reading wise, it's not going so hot, but that's okay. We have time to turn it around. So anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Let me know your favorite and least favorite book of May like we usually do in the comments. And I hope you're not sick like I am. Bye.